Hello, I'm Andrew Daly. I'm the Managing Director of Digital Procurement and Supply Chain at Every Daily. And those of you who follow me regularly will know that I've been doing some very interesting research into the Glassdoor rankings of both the real big players, the full suite platforms in the procurement tech world, but also the best of breeds. And when we're looking at the best of breeds, we found quite a diverse range of performance. And one name really stood out at the very top of those rankings. And that was Gatekeeper. So I'm very pleased today to be able to talk to Patrick O'Connor, their founder and CEO. Patrick, welcome. Thank you for your time. Patrick, you've got 5 stars overall, the top ranking you can get. You've got that level on almost all the categories, and the lowest you've got is 4.8, which is some achievement. You've got 100% CEO approval. What's your secret?
Well, I don't think there is a kind of secret sauce necessarily, but we have always had team health as our North Star. So this Gatekeeper is my 7th business, and they say an expert is someone who's made more mistakes in their given field than anyone else, right? So I can certainly vouch for that. And I've had businesses with great culture, okay culture, and not so good culture, but it was all accidental. And so in building Gatekeeper, I've read enough books and understood enough from personal experience that unless culture is number one, it may as well be in a nice bordering picture on the side of the wall, right? It doesn't actually mean anything. So the first thing I did when building or recruiting into Gatekeeper was spent 3 weeks writing the vision and values, so before employee number 1. And they're largely unchanged from kind of 10 years ago. So they've been our kind of North Star, really. And we've always placed team health above everything else. So of course, looking after our product, looking after our customers and growth are really important, but the foundation of a great business for us starts with our people, only hiring A players, really looking at kind of curiosity and coachability within the team. We surround ourselves by really smart, ambitious and kind people, and that makes it a very enjoyable place to be. And ultimately, we're focused on calm, sustainable growth. So we have a calm company methodology within the business. I think there's a lot of stress in life, and there's a lot of stress in business. I think a lot of the stress in business is artificial. So, words like ASAP and urgent are banned from our vernacular. We try and look at approaching business. One of the terms I use to all of our new starters is saying, look, this is a marathon, not a sprint. So pace yourself accordingly. And so, we are outside of the kind of VC-backed software crazy world that we live in. We grow at like 40 to 60% year on year. That's the kind of self-imposed limit at 60%, because I think if you really value team health, then if growth gets much bigger than that, things just kind of break under the strain of that level of growth. Whereas at kind of 40 to 60%, you can see the stress fractures starting to appear, and you can make sure you can get ahead of them. And in that way, we've retained this kind of calm company and really strong culture within the business.
So those 7 businesses, lots of experience from that, and enabled you to get it so right this time. And 10 years, that's interesting. Your values have largely stayed very similar over that 10-year period. I suppose they've evolved a little, but are you actually interviewing against those values, or is it more giving people visibility during the selection process that that's how you live and live your business lives?
Yeah, so we not only interview against them, but they're also, if you look at them, they're pretty verbose, right? So vision of values is typically pretty snappy. Ours is extremely lengthy, but they act as both a way of resonating with potential candidates, but they also act as a coaching framework. So as people come into the business, and invariably, everyone makes mistakes, right? And individuals can start inadvertently acting performing in a way that's not in accordance with our vision and values. And by having a vision and values that are so lengthy and detailed, we can kind of coach against that and bring them back into kind of parity with where we're going. And in that way, we can make sure we continue to build, what we consider to be the best place that you could work in technology.
Indeed. And you've got nearly 100 people now spread across geographies, time zones, Europe, Asia, etc. What unique challenges does that present to sort of maintain that team spirit and all those values across an organization as diversely spread as that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And, it's kind of maintaining culture as we grow is probably one of the few things that kind of still keeps me awake at night. Luckily, we're financially very very strong foundations as a business. I think there's a number of different techniques with a remote first company. I mean, first off, we've always been remote, Andrew. So, we didn't go through any process adapting during COVID, as a lot of organizations had to do. And we didn't also come back in some kind of hybrid mode, which for me, I think could be quite challenging in terms of how the different team members can be. So I think, number one, we were always kind of set up to be remote. Number two, we are kind of video first. So if any gatekeepers are talking with each other, and we typically have, the teams have daily stand-ups to ensure like high degrees of kind of communication across all of our different regions. We operate in North America, EMEA, and APAC. And then we have quarterly regional meetups. We encourage our gatekeepers to meet up and support them in doing that on a more frequent basis. And then we have an all hands meetup once a year. So this year is in Croatia, in Dubrovnik. So we'll fly all 100 gatekeepers in for kind of 4 days, typically 20% work, 80% R&R, because we do a lot of work with each other all year round. And constantly using other tips and techniques like kind of brain dates, mixing up different individuals, having a lot of cross-functional teams. So having particular projects where we get to mix different individuals together. Yeah, it's a challenge, but I would argue that as a business, we're kind of more connected than a traditional organization where, you might sit next to people or down the corridor from them, but you may know less about them than if you worked at Gatekeeper.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. So many organizations had to go to remote because of COVID. You were doing that before. Yes, there are, of course, other companies that did that, but you're probably in the minority. So, I think there's been real challenges. And I see some organizations that had to change through COVID now struggling to change back to where they used to be, wanting to do that, but actually facing quite a bit of resistance. And even so now, we expect organizations to be flexible on location. There was a time when we should really, geography was a big part of trying to find somebody who could commute into an office, for example. That was a big part of what we did. That's obviously much less so now. But when we do get a client who says to us, we want somebody in the office all the time, we're saying, well, hang on a minute. That's actually going to be a barrier now to you attracting the very best people. Because people have come to a point whereby what they really want is choice. Not everyone wants to be in the office, not everyone wants to work from home, but what they do want is that choice. But you've been giving your people that for a while, obviously.
It's going to be interesting the next couple of years because obviously I think we're all feeling that we're heading into at least very strong economic headwinds and most likely a kind of fairly significant recession. It will be interesting to see how business owners react to that because, of course, in the good times, saying you can work from anywhere is kind of easy to say. Tougher times, tougher kind of fiscal pressures, I think we will see more people demanding everyone go back into the workplace, which I think is a real shame because ultimately Gatekeeper is a very high trust environment. We don't know where essentially even the location people are in and like what hours they're keeping. But I think if you don't trust your employees and you haven't got ways of kind of measuring the value they deliver, you've got bigger problems than where they're working from.
Yeah, indeed. And you talked about 40 to 60% growth per year. You've got 100 gatekeepers after 10 years of trading. Do you think there will be more challenges to maintain that culture, those values, that whole ethos that you've built? Will it be more difficult, next year, the year after, or do you think that you've got a plan, you've made it work for 10 years now? It's more of the same for you, just staying true to what you really believe in.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. The company's 10 years old. The Gatekeeper part of the journey is kind of 6-7 years old because we were actually a procurement consultancy, built Gatekeeper for ourselves, and then saw such a demand in the market that we burned the boats on the consultancy business and went all in with Gatekeeper. So it's kind of interesting because we come at this from scratching our own itch from the procurement side of things. I think how we look at protecting this as we grow. I think we've added 35 people in just the last year. So there's massive kind of growth at the moment that we're seeing is really around kind of 3 different aspects. One is, making sure our vision and values are the way in which we continue to conduct ourselves and that we never allow them to be deprioritized, because as I mentioned earlier, unless they're number one, they're number nothing, right? So that is absolutely crucial. I think within our vision and values, we've got things like, being a lifetime learner, so a big focus on growth. And in my own personal journey, I know I can't be the same CEO in a year's time as I am now in order to be able to run that company. So we're all on our own kind of growth journey. So I think number one, kind of vision and values. Within that as well, number two is kind of fearless feedback. So we run ENPS surveys on a regular basis. Our latest ENPS is 64, which is, I think, pretty good. But we listen to what everyone is saying as the organization changes. And of course, you bring in different middle layers of management. People are one step removed from where they were before. And there's interesting challenges at each stage. But I think as long as we're giving people feedback and learning and people can see that we're acting on that feedback, then I think it keeps us on the right path. And then lastly is transparency. We share everything internally about what the company's doing, where we're going, the mistakes we're making, owning mistakes, because if you're not making mistakes, you're certainly not trying enough things. And I think that combination of kind of fearless feedback, transparency, and then using our vision and values as our guiding light is really fundamentally is what will allow us to kind of maintain this as we scale.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how you got your 100% CEO approval, but actually just listening to the point there about the transparency, the constant feedback, and the fearless feedback, as you put it, and the fact that I think it sounds like your employees will really feel like they've got a voice that they'll listen to. That is very important in an organisation of any size, I think, and that's probably an insight into why you've got your 100% approval. That and taking your staff to Dubrovnik for a few days R&R, I'm sure that helps as well.
Well, the last one was in Koh Samui in Thailand, so they're typically quite a lot of fun. Actually, they're personal highlights of mine in this kind of journey is getting everyone together and just mixing everyone up and having a lot of fun.
Careful, Patrick. If you carry on like this, your inbox is going to be full of CVs after everyone's watched this, and you're never ever going to need to use me at any stage ever. So that's a really interesting insight. And for those that have seen the Glassdoor video that I've made, we have got quite a range across the best of breeds. There was certainly a fairly consistent level of rankings for the sort of the top 10 in terms of size of employees in the sector, the SAP Ariba's and Coopers of this world. They were quite consistent. But when we looked at the best of breeds, there's a much wider range. And I say you came out very much on top. There's one or two others that had really good rankings as well. There's one or two that had quite alarming scores. So I'll be publishing that video in due course. But Patrick, that's been fascinating from my perspective to listen to what you've done so successfully. And I congratulate you on great achievement. And I wish you well with continuing that as your growth continues. Despite the troubling economic headwinds, I'm sure you're set fair for some more growth over the next couple of years. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Take care.
Thanks.